Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, email, phone calls, text messages, blogs, message boards, IRC, each represents a way in which information gets packed into our day. Each is a unique line of communication between us and the rest of the world, and it's exhausting to think about all the myriad ways that people can choose to contact us. And it's even more dizzying to think of how to actually filter through all that noise. Spam, bots, Cutco salespeople, to get to the signal, the thing that actually matters to you. And if you think it's tough in your personal life, just imagine that dial cranked up to 11. That's what companies have to deal with today. Customers straining to communicate through every channel possible, and companies trying to sort through the noise to understand how they can actually help. Hey everyone, welcome to the Anexipod, the official podcast for Anexinet. This is episode 20, recorded August 10th, 2017. I'm your host, Ned Bellavance, Director of Cloud Solutions at Anexinet. Here on the Anexipod, we talk technology for the enterprise, covering infrastructure, app dev, analytics, and anything else that is shiny. On this episode, we will be talking Omni-Channel Analytics with our own Mark Langsfeld, Vice President of Analytics. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thanks for having me, Ned. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. So, Mark, before we dive into the topic, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do here at Anexinet?
Sure. I'm in charge of the analytics innovation that we're basically driving here at Anexinet, and anything having to do with strategy and innovation regarding making sense of data. So with that, we're building IP-based solutions, wrapping around services, and attacking the market with point solutions that really drive business outcomes.
Right. So we've got a broad platform that goes across, multiple horizontal areas and then specific vertical solutions that focus on specific industries, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, in the introduction, I alluded to the multiple channels of communication that exist between a company and its customers, and I believe there's a more succinct term for that.
We actually call that Omni-Channel Analytics.
So what is Omni-Channel Analytics, and why would a company want to know more about them?
So basically, we all know that customers use their own preferred touch point or channel to connect with the company, right? Mm-hmm. So some will call, some will text, some will email, some will even chat, and we're not going to change that user behavior. Users are going to do what they're going to do.
Right.
But if you're the company, to basically take all those siloed data sets and siloed channels and integrate them into one view, it becomes really powerful because they get a 360 view of everything that customer is thinking about and saying.
Okay, yeah, because some are easier to harvest. Like anything text-based is relatively easy, but if they're calling in, that's tough.
Yeah, you're dealing with audio signals at that point, right? So it does require doing things like voice-to-text transcription and even OCR technology, object character recognition for files like come in through PDFs. So there's a bunch of parsing technologies that are required.
Right. So when someone writes an angry letter, you need to be able to, or a very happy letter.
That's
I
right.
mean, let's take the positive of this. So if someone writes a glowing review of your company and sends that in a letter, mm-hmm. You have to OCR it in some way to capture that sentiment.
Absolutely. So it's extracting out that text and then mining it for sentiment and also what the letter's all about, so that we can take that information and then synthesize it with all the other touch points that we have for that particular customer to really understand what that customer's experience is about.
Okay. So one of the vertical industries that has really shown an interest in omnichannel is the insurance industry. Why that industry in particular, and what are they hoping to gain from the solution?
Well, first of all, it's a very competitive space. So the property and auto space is very competitive. You've got 10 to 20 players really fighting for customer awareness. And so customer experience is really important, as well as because it's so competitive, you've got margin pressures. And so they're all looking for ways to really achieve operational efficiencies too.
Right, yeah. If you watch any primetime TV, you're well aware of the extreme competition of insurance companies. That's like, I feel like half the ads are for some insurance company promoting their particular wares through usually something that's kind of funny, so at least they're enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, the shock and awe. Yeah.
I don't generally think about my insurance company aside from those commercials, except when I have a problem, and when that happens, whether it's a car accident or like a problem with my home, I'm probably going to call them looking for help, and that seems like an important moment for my insurance company to shine. Mm-hmm. That's their moment where I'm calling in and I'm distraught about something and they need to help me. So how does Omni-Channel Analytics help a call center improve that customer interaction?
Well, there's no question that if you're grabbing all the customer interactions that are happening for or to the company, we can really mine the data, the transcriptions, the OCR text, the chats, the emails, everything that's being the feedback loop to understand what customers are calling about, what they want. And so with that, companies can now really better respond because they understand what customers are looking for. And so we can come up with the top 10, 20 things that in that particular day customers are basically calling about, emailing about, whatever. And so that rapid response, can all be prepared ahead of time.
Okay, great. And yeah, when I think about how I might interact with an insurance company, I might call in because I have a problem. But then if I'm not happy with the service or something went wrong, then I might tweet about that. And maybe I'll write something on Facebook to my friends about how, I had this interaction and it wasn't great. Being able to take that entire story and condense it into something that the company can go back and look at, it seems like it'd be sort of useful.
It's a no-brainer. And in fact, almost every client we see in the insurance space, that's exactly what they're trying to do today. So that's what Omni-Channel Analytics does. We call it customer journey mapping, where we can see, okay, Ned, you called on this particular date about some kind of issue. Maybe it was a claim. Then you followed up with an email just to check the status a couple days later. And then you maybe have tweeted something because we weren't quick enough to get back to you in the resolution of your claim. So all of that interaction data can be basically mapped out. So we get that full view.
Okay, great. Yeah, that seems very useful.
Yeah.
Let's flip it around a bit and look at it from the insurance company's perspective. So if you're a company and you're running a call center, you want to know how effective your employees are being. Are they really helping customers? Do some of your agents need a little bit of coaching? And what are the KPIs, the key performance indicators? I mean, when I think about it, you probably already know the call time, right? That's easy to harvest, and the number of calls answered, but that doesn't necessarily give you the real indicator of how effective your agents are being.
Exactly. Typical traditional call center analytics do call times, do number of calls by agent, right? Maybe it's time of day. But when you start to do more advanced mining of the actual call recording, we can see things like overtalk. So are you more likely to talk over me, right? Or there's too much silence time, which may mean I'm either slow to respond if I'm an agent to your request, or maybe I have to go offline for a second and actually go into a system and pull up something. So if we start to see things like long silence times, that may be a coaching moment, or even look at process or technologies that the call center is running, because those are gaps of just pure inefficiency.
Right. I could think of times where I've been on a phone call and the person is fighting with the computer system they're using to get the information that they want to give to me. So it's not necessarily an issue with the agent themselves. They're doing all they can. The system that's supposed to be supporting them is what's failing them. And that could be hard to capture if you're just looking at call times.
Exactly. So there's really two different sort of schools. One is systems that can be improved, processes that can be improved across the board, right? So but with call center data, we can basically, in Omni-Channel, look at all the categories of what's going on in these calls by looking at these transcriptions, right? So the actual call recordings, not just the reason code that maybe CSRs are selecting, right? So you called Ned about billing. That's typically all the customer knows. And maybe they have some notes about your issue of billing. But when we actually look at the transcription of your and my conversation, we can see that it was about billing, and then maybe it was about a rate increase that I got a notice in the mail. And so all that nuance we can actually tag and categorize in these analytics, right? So we get to have that understanding. So when people call in, we can see, well, about this particular issue or topic, we see that callers on average spend maybe 2 or 3 minutes longer than other categories, or certainly the average call time, right? So with that, we can see that there's an opportunity to actually improve that typical user type or call type across the board, which is a coaching issue or systems issue. Or it could be, Ned, you're just really slow at this particular call type.
Right.
And you could use some help and maybe go into the training manual and learn how to maybe resolve that issue quicker.
Right. So you're talking about these are calls that are being recorded.
Yeah.
And just to take a step back from the solution, in a traditional world, the managers would get to listen to like 1% or 2% of all recorded calls.
Typically, what we hear today, most managers spend maybe every 2 weeks with you, Ned, if you're the CSR, maybe you'll get together with the manager every 2 weeks, listen to 4 phone calls, maybe 5 phone calls.
Wow.
And that's it.
That's not even 1% probably of the total call volume that I'm responsible for. It's pretty hard to get an accurate picture of how well I'm doing as a CSR when you're only listening to what would be almost a sampling error in the world of statistics.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, that's typically, well, 2 things here. One is that most call systems aren't even tagged to the CRM solution, so we don't even have a customer ID. When you think about it, most calls are being recorded for quality assurance purposes, right?
Oh,
so they
that
record
is the
these,
tagline, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they record these phone calls and they just dump them into a data warehouse by themselves. And it's meant so that the manager can go in there and you and I can go listen to your calls and actually do training. But when you tag it to a customer ID and we mine all the calls, we can tell you everything about your interactions every day.
So you're taking that recording, which you said just sits in a data warehouse as just a plain old audio file. It has no metadata assigned to it. It's not transcribed. And the solution that Anexinet has put together can do what with that audio file?
Well, first of all, we match that audio file with CRM, potentially even policy data, so we can tie what actually was being discussed to you as a customer, right?
Okay.
And get a full view. We then transcribe it, and then all the metadata is basically assigned to this. It's almost like a cube of data, right? Where you've got the transactional side, the policy side, and your contact information, as well as everything your feedback loop tells us.
Okay, great. So that information that's being mined out of it, is that require a human sitting there, or is it all automated?
It's all automated.
Okay.
Which, talk about efficiencies, right? So with, let's say, an average call center in the property insurance space could be, 20 million phone calls a year, easily, right? In fact, most of them could be 10x that. So to do this with people, just the people time, it's impossible. Just not enough people to go, man hours to go process all this, right?
You'd bankrupt yourself trying to do that.
Exactly. But with just advances in technology and the system we've put together in the solution, transcribing those 20 million phone calls, 100 million phone calls a year can be done literally in 100 times the speed of real time. The analytics are pretty much real time. They can refresh every 15 minutes or so.
Okay.
And you as a CSR can go in and get a full dashboard of everything about your KPIs. So the sentiment of your phone calls, types of calls, average call time by call type, your speaker quality, your clarity, your customer sort of outcomes, everything about your performance you can get in one single view, as well as the customer. The manager sees his pool of resources and how they're performing too.
That's very powerful from an agent perspective. If I'm a CSR and I'm a motivated individual that wants to do better in my job, having a dashboard that gives me some actionable information to improve, that's huge. And then the manager getting more of a real view of how his CSRs are doing and
across the board for all of your calls. So not just these 4 phone calls every 2 months, or every 2 weeks rather, right? So you get a real outcome-based measurement compared to the statistical sampling, which you could argue is an error easily at that.
Right, absolutely. Before the show, we were talking a little bit, and you mentioned that one interesting thing you uncovered in your research is that most agents are actually selecting other as the primary reason for their call. And why would that be, and how can we help uncover the actual reason for the call?
So any manager would probably laugh if we were, could hear this conversation.
Yeah.
So in most of the projects we worked with, anywhere between a third and over half of phone calls are being tagged as other.
Wow.
So imagine having a reason code selection box, right, where you as a CSR get to pick, this call was about billing, has to do with the claim. There's 10 reason codes, and then there's this other. Maybe it's because the agents don't really, maybe there's a couple topics that are being discussed on the phone call, so you can't select 2, therefore you'll pick other. Or, I don't have enough time, I got to get through my day, I want to lower my average call time, I'll select other.
Right, it's just easier for efficiency's sake.
Yeah. And if you're the client, it's pretty difficult to get insights from your data if what you're seeing for your call types are other.
Yeah, you can't really mine that for anything, or say, hey, I want to search on all call types that are about billing, but a third of your calls are tagged as other, and half of those could be at least in part about billing, but you don't know that, and there's no way to tell.
Right. So one example was we recently installed Omni-Channel Analytics at a very large property and auto insurance company, and we solved the other by, again, text mining all these phone calls. And in fact, almost all the other were basically representative of all the other call types that we had for master categories. So
Gotcha.
everyone kind of knew this, but again, now other doesn't really exist. In this case, too, they're getting rid of other altogether because there's no need for CSRs to select what the calls are about. We'll do that through automation.
Okay, so not only does it put less work on the CSR because they don't have to try to decide which of these categories most closely resembles what I'm doing.
Exactly.
They just go, I'm going to answer the call and move on.
Exactly. So call notes and the reason code selector workflow is no longer needed. And that's a lot of savings.
Right. So obviously, insurance companies running call centers, they want to maximize the productivity of their agents. And that's sort of what we've been talking about. And they also want to make sure that the customer has a great experience when they call in. So aside from having a manager listening on the line or like a customer satisfaction survey after the fact, which can be a tough item to track, how can an Anexinet solution help bridge the gap?
Yeah, I mean, most companies will typically do a CSAT or NPS score at the end of the phone call. Maybe they'll kick out an email for a survey.
Yeah, and the response rate on that is
2 or 3%.
It's not good,
right? And you usually get the extreme tail, right, where you got people who are really happy or really pissed off. They're responding, so it gives you this sort of jaded view of customer experience. We track the customer sentiment all throughout the phone call, so literally, in every exchange, be it chat or email too. So we can see in the beginning of the phone call it was very negative, in the middle it became neutral, and then towards the end it became actually pretty positive. That's a good sign, right? A resolution sign of outcomes. So that's what we track as a KPI through all the data.
Okay. That seems extremely helpful, especially seeing that journey from I started out so angry because something just happened to me and I need to talk to someone about it. And then the CSR helps me through that process. And by the end, I'm delighted with the interaction I had with the CSR. And maybe they actually helped resolve the issue that I called in about.
Exactly.
With.
So since we know what the calls were about through the call type analysis, and we actually track the sentiment throughout the phone call, we can really see which call types lead to which outcomes, not just for the company overall, but for you, Ned, as a CSR, right? So it's a win-win on both fronts.
Cool. So we're helping call centers become more operationally efficient, and we're improving customer interaction. I imagine from the business perspective, that might have a positive impact on the bottom line. So you said we've already set this up for some companies. What's a typical ROI you're seeing in the marketplace, and can you give a real-world example?
So as it relates to ROI, the bottom line we're really seeing is it's about a 4 to 5x ROI annually, with all the operational savings and revenues that we're able to achieve with the solution.
And those are real numbers, right?
Yeah.
I know sometimes people's BS light goes on when they hear ROI.
No, in our case, we actually have an itemized list of every single use case and savings and how you achieve that to base to that 4 to 5x ROI.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's real numbers. Cool.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, we're looking at ways to either increase revenues. So that's by boosting things like Net Promoter Scores and customer experience, or we're looking for ways to achieve operational efficiencies, right, into the call center operations. So when you look at both measurements, let's just take cost efficiencies as a first start. With that, literally looking at all the different call types, where average call times are just longer than they should be or longer than certainly average. We can basically recommend either system, applications, certain process improvements to drive savings right immediately to the bottom line. Typically, we see if you have, let's say, 2 million phone calls a year, honestly, you're going to probably find about $2 million of savings just through pure cost reduction by finding efficiencies across the board.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
What would be an example of a way to drive that efficiency to get that like almost dollar per call?
Yeah. So like one example could be typically for an insurance company, most calls are about billing and payment. Right, there's no secret there.
Right.
So a big chunk of your phone calls are about that. But what about billing and payment? And so we'll see certainly call types about maybe fees, potential like the timing of your payment. Maybe you're on auto pay. Perhaps you have a premium increase. Right, all these other sort of subtypes that come up. So let's really look at the data, see what call types are about, and then look at the average call times for all billing and payment. And we'll see that typically, let's say maybe you've got 2 million phone calls a month, 10% of those calls are about billing and payment, maybe more. And then from that, the number of calls simply by the average call time. We can come up with some type of reduction measurement saying if we can just improve this process or build an application that takes these two apps that CSRs have to use today and extends the call time another couple of seconds. If we can just take that average call time and reduce it down to a mean, there's your monthly savings.
Wow. Okay. So just something that targeted and specific has a big impact on the bottom line overall.
Yeah. So we're not really saying, oh, in general, we think we can drive this amount of savings. It's very tactical based on the type of interactions callers are having with the company.
Right. And every company is going to be a little bit different.
Absolutely.
I'm sure there's trends that span across, but
yeah, and there's seasonality too, right? So
oh yeah, there you go. So I know that insurance companies they have a sort of a corporate back end, but they also have these brokers out in the field that are selling policies. Have you found a trend within that world that could help reduce costs and sort of offset how much the call center is doing?
Yeah. So once we're taking, we're talking about these calls and marrying up to the policy data, right, in the CRM.
Okay. Yeah.
We can also tag that to the broker, right, and so the broker office. So now we can see, if we look at all the brokers across the United States, which ones are driving an unusual amount of call activity given the book of business that they have.
Okay.
And so maybe there's certain training we can provide that particular broker to basically resolve you as Ned as a customer directly versus having to then have Ned, you call up the company's corporate care center. And so anyway, if we can just do that, which is a big win, we can dramatically reduce the inbound calls to corporate call centers.
That's interesting. Yeah. So what would be sort of a reason that a broker would be driving so many more calls to corporate as opposed to fielding them themselves?
Yeah, there's a host of reasons. In fact, one of our clients recently told us that we identified a broker that was driving an unusual amount of phone calls to the corporate inbound call center. They actually called up the broker, went into billing and payment, and it went automatically through an IVR system to corporate.
Okay, so even though they were supposed to be answering these calls at the local office and maybe fielding some of those questions, they were just forwarding it right along. So if you pushed 3 for billing,
You
boom,
went right to corporate. Exactly. So no surprise why they were driving an unusual amount of phone calls.
That's the sort of thing that you would never find without a tool to really sift through that data and pull anomalies.
Absolutely.
Wow. So that's a big win on visibility. Go analytics.
Yeah. So, which also speaks to other use cases like optimizing the IVR system. So, since we know what calls are, what call types are being discussed every single day. So, if there's let's say a weather pattern, an unusual amount of claims are in a certain market, in that particular market, we can actually adjust the IVR system to route calls more efficiently than having everything go to a general pool. So if we see things like about the claim, about this, maybe it's a hurricane, we can actually tag into the IVR program that particular workflow so that things are resolved much quicker.
So could that be a situation where you look at the area code of the inbound call and go, okay, that's coming from the area that's impacted by this blizzard or this hurricane or whatever the event is. So it's probably going to be about this thing. I'm either going to route it directly to that thing or provide that as the first option
exactly
in the tree.
Exactly.
Because nothing like listening through all 7 options and trying to figure out which one fits into your use case the best.
Right. Either you had to push number 2 or 7. And,
right. And you end up pushing 0 because you're like, no, I just need to talk to a person.
I always wonder how many people actually have to repeat the selection of all those different options.
That has happened to me because number 2 will be close, and I'm like, maybe, but I want to listen to the rest, and then I get back.
I forget number 2 again.
Yeah, right? I forget which one was it, 2 or 3, and now I have to repeat again. So yeah, it would be fantastic if I call into something, and most of the time, the very first option is the one that I actually want.
Yeah, it becomes an intelligent use case or intelligent application, right? Where instead of just being a fixed IVR system, it's something that's dynamic, based on location, and all of its sensed data, its signal data, comes from Omni-Channel Analytics.
Okay, great. Looking to the future, what new things do you see coming down the pike for Omni-Channel Analytics, and where else the solution could be applied?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so we talked about all the ways of really improving agent coaching, right? So having a dashboard view where they can see all their KPIs, overtalk, silence time, sentiment, everything. that still requires you as an agent to go in and try to decipher the information so that you can improve yourself. Well, that's not really a smart system, right? In the sense that something that helps you or coaches you. So typically your manager sits down with you and then, obviously these are things you can work on, Ned, in your greeting and how you actually answer these calls, maybe certain call types, whatever. But wouldn't it be incredible if, let's say, every couple of weeks you got an email that had either videos in it, tips for particular parts of the training manual to go to based on all of your historical call performance for that period of time. So, hey, Ned, we saw maybe your greeting wasn't as timely or wasn't as clear as it could potentially be. So that's a tip, Ned. Here, watch a video on how to properly greet. So think of it as like an agent self-coaching application, a digital application that teaches you, Ned, how to become the best CSR you can be.
Wow, that sounds pretty awesome. And that allows the manager to be more effective across a whole bunch of CSRs because they now have another tool in their tool set that helps them with training and coaching and just ongoing mentorship of all of these different CSRs.
Yeah, it allows us to scale the manager. So literally as part of that type of solution, we sit down with the manager and go through different use cases for if you saw an agent that its average call time for this call type was just too long. What are they doing? What can we do to improve? And who would say, oh, well, it's because he's probably not going to this screen of the application fast enough. He's probably going to this part first. By doing that, we can save 10 seconds. So that's like a tip we can then log. It becomes a rule in our rules engine for the self-coaching application.
Okay, so the self-coaching application has a big rule set that it looks at, and if it sees something that matches the rule, then that triggers
a recommendation.
Back to the person. Hey, I noticed this is happening a lot. Here's a way you could potentially improve it.
Yeah. It's a big opportunity for all care centers globally is to start building out these smart systems that basically sense signals for all of the customer care agents' data and then allows them to basically become the best agents they can be.
Right. And talking back about a more horizontal platform, this is the sort of thing that, obviously it's applicable to the insurance industry, but
it's a horizontal use case.
Yeah. There's call centers for all different types of industries, and they all need that coaching and mentorship, and this is something that can assist with that.
Yeah, so we're actually not only deploying that in the insurance space, but in the life science space and the CPG and food industry too.
Wow. Okay. So that's something in the future to look forward to, and maybe we can have you back on the Anexipod when that's ready to roll out, and we can talk all the way through that and what you've discovered.
Yeah, maybe you can even actually self-coach us on how to become the best Anexipods we can be too.
Yeah, that'd be great. What am I doing wrong about my podcast host style? Awesome. If people want to see a demonstration or learn more about the solution, what's the best way to engage with Anexinet?
Yeah, the best way to engage is certainly contact us through our website, anexinet.com. Just put in a request, and we're more than happy to set up a demo.
Okay.
Yeah, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be publishing a demonstration, probably a YouTube video for folks to check out too.
Oh, that's great. Sometimes people like to do their research before they actually reach out to someone. So to have a video that can see this in action and actually understand it, that would be huge.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. Well, since I already asked you about an 80s movie, I just realized that.
We can't do that.
We can't do that one again. So I think it's important to ask you your favorite 80s hair metal band.
Metallica?
Yeah, that's good.
All right.
I'm down with Metallica. All right. And that was our Omni-Channel Analytics show with Mark Langsfeld. If you enjoyed the Anexipod and you're looking for more content, why not check out our sister podcast, Buffer Overflow? On the show, I am joined weekly by my co-host Chris Hayner and an assortment of other Anexinet colleagues to discuss what's new and interesting in the IT news sphere. Thanks to the marketing team for helping me pull this together. Thanks to Lee Rosevere and Professor Click for providing the music for Anexipod. Thanks to Anexinet for helping me produce this podcast. If you're looking for a company to help you with your digital transformation, then I would recommend reaching out to Anexinet to see how they can help. If you'd like to know more about me and what I am up to, you can check me out on Twitter at Ned1313 or on my website at nedinthecloud.com. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, IT moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to look around once in a while, you could miss it.